when you have a struggling football team that has not come close to meeting expectations, you have to make difficult choices. And those choices often look like it did today when Jeff Grimes, I presume, and Luke Fickell got together and decided that that offense would better be served without A.J. Blazek. I don't think this was college level calculus kids. Anyone with even a meager appreciation of offensive line cohesion and performance could see that the 2025 unit was, at least by Wisconsin standards, a disaster. But more objectively, this was one of the absolute worst rushing offenses and total offenses in college football, certainly Power 5, Power 4, and in the Big Ten. Not good. And I think when the two existing 2026 class linemen both decommitted within a few days of each other, soon before signing day, the writing was very much on the wall. I understand they got a nice, solid 4-star kid at the end of the class there, which was a nice save, but there just wasn't enough. And if there were a list, I know there have been some shows on this. By the way, like and subscribe. Always appreciate it. Always get that housekeeping out of the way. Can't let the PJ Fleck shows, the PJ Fleck nude hang gliding hour win. But if we were to do a ranking before this happened of the most on the clock position coaches for a change, this offensive line would have been number one, probably by a substantial margin. I don't think we're quite done here. I don't think it's going to be a coordinator, but I do think some position guys will either move on or be fired. But let's hold that for now and talk about Blazek. I think one of the fundamental changes Wisconsin went away from a few years ago when Fickell was hired was trying to install the air raid. And obviously the running game is going to look very different under that paradigm. And it was pretty clear that that was not working. And I know that the hiring of Grimes was an attempt to kind of not smash mouth it, but get it back into a more traditional Big Ten running offense with some, passing that made it look better, or that went like hand in glove with the running. And it just didn't work at all this season. There was just no push. It was just it was hard to watch. And yes, I understand losing your left tackle, Kevin Haywood, before the season starts, that's bad. That's unfair. In much the same way that losing your quarterback is unfair for almost the entire season, for the third season in a row, with significant time missed by the portal quarterback. But this is a we don't care what have you done for us lately kind of situation with college football in 2025. And there's no grace for having an offensive line that functioned like that, like it did last year. It was just brutal, terrible, awful. And where he is, by all accounts, a really nice and engaging guy. And until this cycle, a pretty good recruiter. I would say that's fair. Blazek's time was up. There's no way you can look at a recruit, whether it's a portal quarterback, a portal wide receiver, of which we're going to have to get at least two of both, even a running back, a lineman, of course. You're not going to be able to look that kid in the eye and say, you know what, we're going to run it back with Blazek. Things will be fine. You already have a little bit of a sell job to do that with Grimes. You can't do it with the offensive line coach. So I 100% support the Wisconsin Badgers in making this call. I tweeted this out recently. I take no joy in a man losing his job. That's not what it's about. But this is the big time, kids. And you want to play with the big boys and you don't perform, time to move on to the next guy. And that's just the way it is. And while we're on the subject, let's talk a little bit about the new guy, so to speak. He's a gentleman by the name of Eric Mateos. Has a history with Grimes. SEC work down in Arkansas fairly recently. Had been with Grimes in previous stops. And, look, I did not do a Mateo deep dive where I'm able to come on here and say, this is an A+ hire, this is a B- hire. I'm not going to do that. But I do feel pretty confident based on the things I've seen already that this is a well-regarded coach who has had a history of some successful successful offensive lines. Um, I will admit the first thing that popped into my mind, just because I'm a crazy Badger fan, is when Bielema in 2012 went down to the SEC and grabbed Murkison, I think his name was, from Ole Miss, and it was an unmitigated disaster. I have to reassure myself, and I'm correct here, that has nothing whatsoever to do with this. Those are just two totally different things. I just thought I saw SEC coach with Mateo, and I was like, oh, but yeah. So I'm going to choose to be optimistic about this. I don't see a lot of this guy's a terrible hire. How could you do this? I think people, it's almost a sense of relief in that until a coaching change is made, you can never be 100% sure it is going to be made. I know that the people I spoke to who have better ties to the program than I do felt pretty confident this was coming. And I think the timing is good. You want to get this all kind of sorted out to not only retain people, because the Wisconsin transfer portal exit lane right now is very full, but you want to have someone good to attract a quarterback. Offensive lineman, we're going to need that too, as I said earlier. Wide receivers, you need to sell the vision of a functional offensive system in 2026. And there's a lot of faith you have to take it on with the current coaching staff to sell that vision based on what we saw in 2025. It's just a fact. It's nothing personal. So as important as offensive line is at OLU from not only an in-game coaching and preparation sense, but a development sense, this had to happen. It simply had to. And when I say it has to work, it sounds overdramatic. But this gentleman is going to have to come in, win that room over, which you always have to do. Reputation good, reputation amazing. That's never going to be enough because the relationships, a lot of the kids in the Wisconsin Badger room, and I don't know if people are going to go in the portal now, but I believe, based on what I've seen and what I've heard, that Blazek was well liked. Okay, I mean that's not unusual for coaches who get fired. Oftentimes, sometimes how well liked they are is directly related to some of their shortcomings. I'm not saying that's what happened with Blazek. I'm just saying, don't be surprised that the new sheriff in town is going to have to win these guys over. I'm going to presume it's going to happen, or at least the guys who want to be here, and then we can start cooking. But the fundamental building block to an improved, and it's not going to be hard to improve, but I think when I say improvement, it's got to be much improved. The fundamental building block to a much improved 2026 Wisconsin Badger offense is the offensive line. It's just going to have to be so much better, from snaps to creating actual holes for running backs. So you got to sell the vision to the running backs to retain some of the guys you got, because that's going to be an issue. To go into the portal and get someone, that's going to be an issue. You need to say, hey, we got a guy who's done it before. Here's what this can look like. And Grimes will have to go into the vault a little bit, not too long ago, and show how things were in 2023 when he's winning when he's a Broyles Award semifinalist or finalist. So I would say I'm pressing pause on any sort of like unusual elation at this. This is a sense of relief is what I'm feeling from this move. It is one of the early signs that Wisconsin is getting serious and realistic about the things it needs to do in 2026 to reverse this atrocious hole it has dug itself into. And since, what we think as fans and what people say as journalists, it doesn't matter. Wisconsin has made the decision that it is committed to Luke Fickell. That is something that is cast in stone now. So we are going to look at things through that lens and do the best we can to have the best 2026 possible. And this was a nice first step. Again, I'm not calling for anyone else to get fired in the sense of like, I want these guys to lose their job and their livelihood, but I do not believe, if Wisconsin is being realistic about winning in 2026, that this can be the last coaching move. It's a big one. It's a building block for reasons I said, but it cannot be the last one. So let's keep our eyes open, see what happens with recruits in the portal, see if these guys were, some of these offensive linemen were so tethered to Blazek that they don't want to continue. I hope that's not the case. And then get in that portal and grab a couple of dudes. Gonna have to do it. Gonna have to do it. Got to get a couple dudes. I think there's a lot of returning talent, but you need to stabilize that line with some experience. As we saw, left tackle can be a disaster if you do not have ample bodies in the room to absorb lack of performance or injuries. Anyway, first domino has fallen on the Wisconsin staff to try to have a better 2026, and Scary Alvarez is here for it. I'm also out.